Hello, my name is Alicia Goodman with the marketing team. Welcome to Flip Learning, Gateway to Student Engagement with John Bergman and Aaron Sams, part of the ASCD Summer Boot Camp webinar series on classroom technology. This webinar is brought to you by Adobe Presenter. The all-new Adobe Presenter 10 enables educators anywhere to flip learning. You can easily create video lectures from your desktop, share course materials with students, and track learner progress without investing in an LMS. Find out more at www.adobe.go/flipclass. And now a brief introduction to our presenters. Jonathan Bergman believes that educators should ask one guiding question: what is best for my students in my classroom? To the best of his abilities, he has done this in his 25 years as a high school science teacher. He received the Presidential Award for Excellence for Math and Science Teaching in 2002 and was named a semifinalist for the Colorado Teacher of the Year in 2010. Bergman is currently the lead technology facilitator for the Joseph Sears School in Kenilworth, Illinois. Aaron Sams has been an educator since 2000. He received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching in 2009 and co-chaired the committee to revise the Colorado Science Academic Standards. Sams holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Biochemistry and a Master of Arts degree in Education, both from Biola University in Colorado. He is currently a classroom science teacher in Woodland Park, Colorado. Bergman and Sams are authors of the ASCD book, Flip Your Classroom, Reach Every Student in Every Class, Every Day. ASCD is pleased to welcome John Bergman and Aaron Sams.
Well, thank you for having us. This is John Bergman.
And this is Aaron.
We'd like to know a little bit about you guys, so we're going to ask you to do a question for us. So if you could prompt the question, and we'll have you tell us stuff.
Basically, we want to know who you are. So it looks like we've got quite a few middle school, high school teachers popping up here, and we'll share these results with you in just a moment. But you know, as it was told, John and I, we're teachers. We're classroom instructors at heart. We're both actually currently out of the classroom now. We're doing a lot of work around this flipped classroom concept, doing a lot of writing, a lot of professional development, which we'll tell you a little bit more about later. But really, at our core, we're educators. We're classroom teachers. Everything we're going to tell you about today is based on our experience as a classroom instructors in our own chemistry classrooms in Colorado, and also we'll share stories of others. Classrooms as well. So you'll hear about how people have taken this idea of the flipped classroom and flipped learning and how they've used it in their own classrooms. And actually, if you come back for the follow-up webinar next week to this particular one, we'll be giving you even more information about how other teachers have taken this idea and rolled it out in their classrooms. So we're teachers. We're teachers at heart, and it looks like if we can publish those results now, that about 40% of you are middle school and high school teachers. We've got some 12% elementary teachers, some administrators, some instructional coaches, and some other. I always wonder what other is. Probably, I don't know, librarians. Maybe we got. I had a facilities manager show up to one of my workshops the other day. It was the first facilities manager I ever had come to one of my presentations. It was great. Usually there's just teachers there. But thank you all for coming. We're excited to share our experiences and our ideas with you today. So, John, tell everyone a little bit about our background in terms of what we believe as educators. Where are we philosophically? Primarily, we believe in one thing.
We believe really in one thing: that good teaching is good when it has relationships in it. Relationships matter. They really, really matter. You know, that the old adage that says that kids don't care what you know until they know that you care is such a true story. And we believe that good teaching happens in the context of good relationships with kids. And because of that, I think we believe we need to move from this classroom, this sort of teacher-centered classroom that's sort of been around forever. So this picture probably taken in the 1950s. A lot of classes still look like that. And I'm going to confess right now, I'm the first person, if you could see me, raising my hand saying I was one of those teachers who stood up in front of my room for 19 years and taught in the traditional way. And I think I was pretty good at it, but the reality was as we moved to a different type of a classroom with a flipped classroom, it changed everything. Because I believe we need to move to these classrooms, the classrooms that are project-based, inquiry-driven, where discussion is happening much, much more. Ultimately, we think there needs to be a different way. And I think it also can be thought of this way. The other thing that we are is that Aaron and I are also at our heart not just teachers, but we are learners. So Aaron, tell me about this picture.
Yeah, this picture. I will tell you that it's a little embarrassing, and it was obviously taken in the 1980s, as you can tell, by the wonderful sweaters and the size of my mother's hairdo. So this is me in about 1984, 1985, something like that. Now, the great thing, and I'm very thankful for this, is that I grew up in a household of learners. My mom was a fifth grade teacher in the school district that I was a student in, and so it was great to, when I was struggling in fifth grade math, I would ask my fifth grade teaching mother for help in my fifth grade math, and she was always able to help me. My dad, he had a degree in accounting. He was actually a coal miner by trade, kind of a lifestyle choice. He liked to drive big equipment around rather than working in an office. But he was educated. His mother was a teacher. We've got a whole lot of teachers in my family, and so learning was always valued in my household. And when I struggled, even if my parents themselves couldn't help me out, they would find the resources that I needed to help me to grow as a learner and to get the questions that I had answered. And I'm very thankful that I grew up in that household, and I consider myself educationally privileged. We weren't rich by any means, but I was in an educationally privileged household. So, John, you had a similar experience, I imagine, yes?
Yeah, I also had bad sweaters. No,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I did, actually. That's a pretty bad sweater. Now, that would not be the 1980s. That would be the 1970s. Definitely the 70s. I'm probably 10 years old in that picture in 1974. So, but I also grew up in an educationally privileged home like you, Aaron, and in that, my dad there on the left was the first person in his family to graduate from college, got a degree in aeronautical engineering, and became a fighter pilot in the U.S. Air Force, fought in Vietnam and whatnot. My mother was a teacher, pictured there with the really cool glasses. And then my grandmother, they're getting her honorary doctorate, as it turns out, also graduated from college in 1922. I grew up in a family of people who love to learn. And so I count that as an amazing blessing. But let's now kind of take the focus off of us. And I want to ask, how many of you, if somehow we could have you raise your hands, how many of you are parents out there? I know you can't raise your hand, but I know most of you, I don't know, some of you are parents. I don't know what the percentage you are, but if you are a parent, I want to ask this question. Have you ever had this experience? Have you ever sat at the kitchen table with your son or your daughter, and your son or your daughter have had this expression on his or her face? Because I've been there. I've been there at the kitchen table with my own children. I have 3 children, 2 in college, 1 in high school now. And during their educational career, every single child at some point was in tears as I'm trying to help them on their homework. You see, I believe here's the problem. I believe what we've done is we're sending our kids home to do the hard stuff. Okay, so let's sort of put some meat on that. Aaron, let's talk about hard stuff in terms of Bloom's taxonomy. Talk about that, Aaron, with me.
All right. So we're all in education. We're all familiar with this. Now, obviously, this isn't the be-all and end-all of the way we learn our educational theory, but it's a pretty good framework to understand just, levels of cognition and difficulty of things and ways in which we go about understanding stuff. So, remembering and understanding, that's kind of the easy stuff. That's the basic content. That's the basic information that oftentimes those of us who spend a lot of time doing direct instruction in our classes, we spend a lot of our class time doing the remembering and understanding stuff. As a classroom teacher, first half of my career, a lot of my classroom was simply information transfer. And then I hopefully had a little bit of time to get my students to do some practice problems, and then, might be able to get them moving into the analysis part, doing some labs. But inevitably, I really sent them home to do a lot of that, to do their lab report, to do the practice problem sets, to work on projects, to do a research project, things like that. So I was doing the easy stuff in class, and I was sending them home with the hard stuff. And really, it's easy for me as a teacher to do the remembering and understanding things. I could show up, with no sleep. Maybe my child was awake all night. I could kind of get in there and wing it if I needed to, and I could teach students just about my content area because I was a content area expert. And on the learning side of things too, it's easy to be a passive learner when information transfer is simply going on, and that's all that's going on. But we all know that that's not what is best for our students in an educational setting. So what we really propose is that we should really flip Bloom's taxonomy and spend less of our class times working on remembering and understanding and doing the hard stuff, the upper echelons of Bloom's taxonomy in class with a learning expert, that's you and me, the teacher, in the room, with the students when they're having these frustrating experiences, when they're stuck, when they're struggling.
Aaron, can you go back a slide? I want to just say something about this. You know, this type of education where we send kids home to do the hard stuff, you know, it works. It works just fine. You know when it works fine? When your name is, let's say, Emily Bergmann, my 16-year-old daughter who's at high school, 6 houses away from me as I speak. And when she comes home with her AP chemistry homework, which she's going to tonight, and she's going to say, Dad, can you help me? And I'm going to say, you know what? Yes, because I can help her. I was an AP chemistry teacher. I understand this. It works when you grow up in an educationally privileged home like my daughter has. But we understand that not all kids have the privilege of growing up like Aaron and John or Emily. And so I think what we need to do is, as we flip Bloom's taxonomy, we're going to actually be helping the kids who need the help the most, the kids who do not go home to Aaron's family home or my family home. That's what we need to do. And that's why we believe the flipped class is working so well, is because you're putting the most important resource, and that resource is the teacher with the biggest need is the kids who struggle. So what exactly is the flipped classroom, Aaron?
All right, so you know, this term gets thrown around a lot in educational literature, popular press, things like that. Really on its basic level, what you were doing in class in terms of content delivery, information transfer, direct instruction, lecture, whatever you want to call it, you're going to shift that onto the individual learner outside of class. And what you were sending home for homework, then you're going to do that in the class. And again, this is kind of a good starting point. We encourage people to start here but not stop here. We'll prime the pump here and say that you can do this without sending homework home. You can do it in other learning spaces. But really the key is that you as a teacher, you're going to get the attention away from yourself. You're going to get the attention away from content delivery. You're still going to deliver content. You're just going to leverage some technology to do that. And we're going to have you leverage the technology of teacher-created video to do that. Now, that really kind of then begs the question. You might say, well, why would I want to make my own content? Why can't I just use stuff that's already out there? So John, talk to us about curate versus creation of video content by teachers.
Well, you know, you could just go out and make video or use somebody else's videos. There's lots of videos on YouTube on basically probably anything that you're teaching. I know there's a couple of 100, 300 people or so in this deal. Whatever you teach, it's on YouTube. But let me tell you a story of Adam. I met Adam at a conference in Alabama, and I was speaking, and he said, hey, John, I've been flipping my class, and, you know, it's not going so well. I said, tell me what you're doing, Adam. He said, well, and finally he got down, he says, well, I'm using these videos that are found online from this particular guy. I said, Adam, you need to make your own videos. He said, John, 2 + 2 still equals 4. I said, regardless of whether I say it or somebody else says it, I said, Adam, you need to make your own videos, because I've had enough experience working with a lot of teachers who flip their class that there's something valuable about you making your own. Adam came kicking and screaming to making his own videos. I then saw him this summer at a conference, and he said, hey, do you remember me? I said, actually, yeah, I do remember. I had a good conversation. He said, John, it was magic. He says, before, 45 to 55% of my kids would watch a video with understanding. It's now 100%. I don't know what it is. And I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you guys here in the audience. You know what it is? It's about relationships. We talked about that at the beginning, isn't it? Relationships matter. They have a connection with you. They do not have a connection with, you know, random guy or gal on the internet. There's something about you making your videos. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying you should never use other online content. Please don't say, we're not saying that. But I would say if you had some kind of a continuum, you need to err on the side of teacher creation because relationships matter. So that's what I think makes the difference. And so hurdles. What do you think are some hurdles? So I like the idea of the flipped classroom. So what I want you guys to do is I want you in the chat is I would like you guys to say if I were to do the flipped classroom, here's the 5 things or the one thing that's going to make me not have it happen. So I'd like you guys to just throw your ideas in the chat and we'll see them and I'll kind of read them as they sort of pop up there as fast as it might be too fast, but I'll try and read them. So could you type in what hurdles you see in order for you to flip your class?
Yep, and I'm seeing some come through in the questions area as well here, John.
It could be in the question section. Yeah, question sections, or it could also be lack of technology, time constraints, time-consuming, something, I don't know, making a video. Yep. Okay, student attendance. Oh, I bet that's a higher ed person. Lack of parental buy-in, teacher time to make videos, knowing what to cover, technology, time-intensive, lack of technology, the proper technology, time to prep. When do we have time to make these lecture videos?
Yeah,
Time to make the video.
interesting.
I'm thinking I'm seeing a trend here, Aaron.
I think so. Well, so let's talk about some of these, because the interesting thing is all of the things that you're putting into the questions here are really the common questions that we hear time and time again. So we would like to address some of those for you right now. And if we don't address your questions here, just save those for the end of this session, and we'll try to get to some of those in the end. So the first one is the digital divide. What about students who don't have access to technology outside of the classroom? This is an absolutely legitimate question, but it's not something that should stop you. This is a problem that needs to be solved. So when John and I started doing this back in 2006, 2007 school year, we asked our principal, we said, how many of our students in our school do not have access to the internet at home? That number was 25%. Now, it doesn't matter if that number is 25%, 1%, or 99%. If you're going to require students to access digital content outside of class, you need to provide them with resources to do so. So the way we overcame this is we put video content on USB drives, flash drives, and we also put them on DVDs for students who had no computer or anything like that at home. So we were able to provide access to all of our students in those methods. Now, you might not be able to provide access with those methods in your situation, but I bet you can figure out a way that you could. Maybe you can write a grant and get some iPods or some things that you can check out to your students to deliver content. Or maybe your school is going to do this and you're going to start opening up school early and or have a library staffed at lunch or after school where students can come in and work on that. I know a teacher or a principal in Colorado who did that in a very rural setting. They just opened the school up and let students come in because they had students who not only didn't have the internet at home, they didn't have electricity or running water, 25% of their students. So they just opened up the school and created space for the students to do their work in. So again, this is a legitimate concern, but I bet you can figure out a solution if you're committed to doing this. So don't use this as an out. If you're going to find a reason to not flip your class, don't let it be this. You can find a solution. All right. Now, student, what if they don't watch? What if the students come to class unprepared? So, John, let me ask you a question. How many, all of your students, 100% of your students did all their homework 100% of the time, regardless of whether you flipped your class or not, right?
Yeah, that didn't happen. So no.
Yeah, that didn't happen for me either. Every single one of us out there never gets 100% completion on their homework. That is reality. So what do you already do? Well, if someone shows up and they haven't done their work, you probably have something built into your policies and procedures of your classroom that deals with that. That might be a penalty. That might be they come in after class. That might be some sort of contract that you make with the students or the counselors or the parents where students will do X, Y, or Z for whatever whatever assignment, and you'll give them credit or whatever. You figure this out. Same thing with digital content. I had students who would show up and they hadn't viewed their material, and I had a computer in the back of the room with a headphone splitter, and 3 or 4 students would go back there every class period and watch the content when they got to class, and then they would be missing out on everything else that was happening that the rest of us were doing. And they realized pretty quickly they would rather be participating with the rest of the class rather than just getting caught up and having really a traditional type of experience. Now, John, before we go to the next slide, somebody they mentioned that what if they do watch and they stop coming to class? John, how did we
that's the higher ed thing. So,
yeah, how did we wrestle with that, and what kind of led us to reinvent what we did in our class time?
Well, it really was the story of a higher ed. We started making videos of our class, and then our assistant soup. This is actually how the idea of the flipped classroom came from, guys. This is the story. Our assistant soup came down. She says, my daughter's going to college, and her professor's recording his lectures, and she loves the idea. And then she made this statement. She says, because I don't have to go to class anymore. And that's when Aaron and I looked at each other and said, wait a second, if you can just get the content by sitting in your pajamas at home, why should you go to class? Or what's the point of a kid even being in our classes, even though in our case they're required to attend and there's state laws and attendance and whatever. Our kids by and large came to class. That's when we said, well, what is the value of class time? So we began to rethink what happens in class time. And somebody just asked this question. I forget who it was. And she said, basically, what do I do with class time? It's John, not she. Sorry, John Solis. Hi, John. Identifying the specific activities for formative assessments or in class time. That's the big questions. What now do you do in class? So my encouragement, particularly for you college professors, is you need to really rethink that class as that active, engaging thing so that the students are going to want to come. And you're not going to, also I would say this to you about this, what if they don't watch. Never rescue kids. This is a mistake I see a lot of teachers do. Say, well, only half my kids watch, so now I'm going to go ahead and lecture. You've just told the other half of the kids it wasn't worth it. Don't do that. you're just going to sabotage the whole program. Just don't even try. If you're going to rescue the kids, then just don't even try the method because it won't work, frankly. So I mean, the other hurdles that you guys have, we've actually summarized as what we like to call our 4 T's. And somebody alluded to this, and I've kind of been trying to answer some of the questions as Aaron was chatting. But the first and most important hurdle of all is to flip the thinking of the teachers. We've got to help teachers rethink what class looks like. That it's not about content disseminations, it's about something else. And so that is such an important thing. And so if you don't win this battle, game over. And so the other issues that you had, in fact, let's talk about the next one. Tell me about the second hurdle, Aaron.
Yeah, time. A lot of teachers are worried about a couple things. One is, how much time will it take me to flip my class? And the other question is, what do I do with my class time if I'm no longer delivering direct instruction? So, the level to which this impacts you is going to depend on how much, lecturing or direct instruction you're already giving in your classroom. So, let's address the first one. When am I going to have time to do this? Well, we're not going to lie to you. There is a decent amount of upfront work that you have to do in order to get going. Content creation, video creation. John and I spent our first year just creating video content. We didn't change anything about our classroom, but we committed to doing it. We said, you know what, this is a worthy investment of our time and energy. We're going to do it. We split up the workload. So we both kind of, work smarter, not harder, right? Work with a partner. Make the time to do it. But the nice thing is, once we had the content created, and we spent the second year modifying the content, but once it's kind of where you want it, you can ride on that for a few years. Now, I'm not saying ride that's a retirement, but you can recycle your video content at least for 3 to 5 years. That's kind of the industry standard for blended learning environments, flipped learning environments, for when they would recycle that type of content. So yes, there is some work. Carve it out and just make it happen. I can't really tell you anything else than that. The other thing, though, as John alluded to, is what am I going to do with my in-class time? Well, my recommendation there is go to your subject area conference. If you're a science teacher, go to NSTA. If you're a math teacher, go to NCTM or whatever it is. And you'll find those conferences where you have subject area experts explaining all sorts of amazing things to do. I know I would come out of those conferences and go, wow, those are great. When am I ever going to have time to do any of that stuff? Well, the nice thing is you're going to get a bunch of time back, and you're going to be able to do a lot of those things that you've always wanted to do, but you've never really had the opportunity to do. So you'll get some time back. You'll be able to do some of that cool stuff. The other thing is just join some communities. Like we have an online community, flippedclassroom.org. It's our professional learning community for Flipped Classroom. We got over 21,000 educators on there sharing ideas of how they're reinventing their class. I would encourage you to go there and join and get some ideas and share with your colleagues. So John, talk to us now about some technology, specifically the Adobe Presenter who's sponsoring this webinar.
Yeah, I mean, there is a hurdle of technology, so there is a learning curve of learning new technology. But one thing that Aaron and I are very, very, I don't say happy with, is that the technology developers, at least in this field, have really started to make the video creation crazy easy. And so, I mean, there are lots of softwares, but one being the sponsor of this workshop is Adobe Presenter. It's a great tool. I've got it on my PC and use it. So it's a tool that helps you very crazy easily make flipped class videos. So the key is that you find the right tool for you, and this would be one of them. And there is a learning curve. I get it, and is it the time to learn? But I guess welcome to the 21st century where a lot of things are technological. So we've got to figure out how to interface with some new tools if we're not so familiar. I'd also encourage you to pick up a copy of our book where we talk about the 10 guidelines for making a quality video, things like that can be very valuable. Not just what technology to use, but also what are some principles of making good videos? Because it's not always it's a different. It's kind of weird. You're gonna be sitting in front of your computer and talking at it by yourself. It's weird. So maybe you got one of the person, whatever. It's gonna be a little weird, and you're gonna be like, wait, I don't like my voice. It's like, well, that's what everybody hears. So get over it. I don't know. So there's a lot of things that you just have to and it's weird to be animated. You're making a video at 6 in the morning or 10 at night or whatever, and you're like animated and crazy, and your family's looking at you like, is there something wrong? And here you are making a video because you know that your kids are going to watch it, and your kids are 16 or or 26 or 6 or whatever, and you're trying to engage your kids. So you gotta bring it, I guess.
So John, you have some experience using Adobe Presenter. Can you tell us a little bit about that and kind of this idea of screencasting and how that's been useful in flipping classrooms?
So with a tool like Adobe Presenter, what is used, it's a category of programs called screencasting programs. So what you can do is that whatever's on your screen is recorded. So you push record, and then let's say you have a PowerPoint, like we're showing you a PowerPoint right now, right? And then whatever is happening on the screen is being recorded. So you can show a PowerPoint, or you could be surfing on the internet, and you're going to show them how to get to a certain tool that you want them to access or whatever. But other things that Adobe Presenter does that's kind of cool is that also on the back end there's an opportunity for you to do questions. So in the middle of the video, you can have the video pause itself, and then up will pop a question. And when it's all said and done, you're going to know who watched the video, how long they watched the video, and then what their responses were on the video. So that question of homework, you know, if you will, how do I know that they watched the video? Well, it's all logged. Now, this, of course, assumes they have an internet connection. And if you're working in a, you know, say, high poverty area, you may have to, you know, do other types of tool. But if you can assure your kids are watching it through some internet connection, Adobe Presenter is a nice tool.
All right, so the next thing we want to talk about, is training. Now, we recommend, and some of you are posting this in the questions area, is getting some training. John and I, we have a couple sites we would like to refer you to. The first is flippedclass.com. I'm going to put that into the chat. That's a place where you can contact John and I. We'll be come out and do some training with your school district, or whatever happens to be. The other place we'd like to send you to is flippedlearning.org. Oh, good. You're typing. See, I'm trying to type and talk at the same time. Thanks for doing that, John. So flippedlearning.org. This is a nonprofit organization that John and I helped found with some colleagues of ours. There we have a lot of resources. We have some research that's emerging that we are starting to publish there, and that's also the organization that hosts the professional learning community that we mentioned earlier at flippedclassroom.org. So we recommend that you start networking, you get active. We do have there's a Twitter chat that happens on Monday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern. It's at the hashtag FlipClass, FLIPCLASS. So a lot of great places that you can network and get connected, and then some places that you can get some training. So I would recommend getting some training in terms of again, the thinking component. How do I think differently about classroom practice, about pedagogy? And then there's also the technological component as well. Now, once you pick a technological tool, once you pick a screencasting tool or a video creation tool or a learning management system, a lot of their websites have some great tutorials that they can, 5-minute lesson on how to do X, Y, or Z with their particular product. So they're very handy, and those are also things that John and I can provide as well. So get some training, get some help, network. Yes.
Let me address a couple of questions I'm seeing pop up in the chat. How long should the videos be? So we have a recommendation that the videos be no longer than 1 to 1.5 minutes per grade level. So if you've got a 4th grade class, 4 to 6 is kind of your upper limit. 10th grade, 10 to 15. You kind of do the math there. And probably 15 is your upper limit. And then the other question is, how does this work with exceptional learners and bilingual students? And I would say it works very well, because oftentimes if you have bilingual students, if the teaching is happening in English, for example, frankly, we talk too fast as native English speakers, and they can pause and rewind you. That is a very, very powerful thing. Exceptional students, oftentimes, they just need to hear things again or slower and
or faster.
More faster, yeah, that's true. We had a couple of kids who could do that. But you get the idea is that there's something about having some control of the pace at which you learn it that is very, very powerful. So thank you. I think it's Marlene or Marlon and Paul asked a couple of those questions. But I think it's a good segue. Let me briefly chat about Common Core. So, I mean, if you think about the flipped classroom, let's go back to our Bloom's taxonomy sort of analogy. If you were to look at the old standards, and I'll speak to the standards that I know pretty well, that is the standards in Colorado and the standards in Illinois, where I live now, is that these old standards, pre-Common Core, let's say, if you were to look at, this is the Webb's depth of knowledge chart, many of you are probably familiar with it, but if you look at level 1 there, tabulate, quote, report, you get the idea, kind of lower level thinking, and then level 2 is a skill concept, interpret, modify, construct, and then level 3 is use concepts to solve non-routine problems, investigate, differentiate. You can see cognitively getting more difficult, and then level 4, extended thinking, apply concepts, critique, and analyze. If you were to look at the old standards, at least for Colorado and for Illinois, and I could also say I've talked to a lot of teachers across the country, whether or not you've adopted Common Core or not, is that most of the older standards fit into level 1 and level 2 of this particular depth of knowledge chart. But if you were to look at, as you look at Common Core, and I could say this with definitiveness, is that you will find that there are a lot of level 3s, some 2s and some 4s. And the flipped classroom, what is it about? It's about doing the hard stuff with the kids in class. And so if you're really looking for a way for your kids to do well on Common Core tests, you got to flip your class. Because, and again, we are not huge believers in tests. I mean, we're over-testing our kids. At least that's where we're at philosophically. But the tests are also a reality. And also I think there's a lot of good to some of the newer standards because they are trying to get kids to think deeper. And we want kids to think deeper. And the flipped classroom is about getting deeper stuff to happen. It's about increasing student achievement in every aspect. So let's flip our class so we can do it. Aaron, flip class to flipped learning. What's the, wait. Aren't those the same thing?
Well, sort of. You know, there was a lot of talk about this flipped classroom thing of, using video as an instructional tool. And that's it's a powerful tool. But what we found is some teachers were kind of just stopping there. They were replacing their lectures with video, and they were moving their worksheets into their classroom. And if you think about that, there's really nothing new pedagogically about that. It's lectures and worksheets, but they're just being delivered at a different time. Now, you do get some time back by doing that, so there's some benefit to that. But what we really saw happening is teachers kind of taking this second step. We're going through what we call the second iteration. We'll give you more specifics about that in the next webinar, but what we're calling this is flipped learning. So this idea that you're taking this idea of using video as a teaching tool, and you're using that as a gateway to move you to another place as an educator. Now, a lot of this is happening being driven by one question, and we kind of call this the one question, the driving question behind all things flipped, and that's what's the best use of your face-to-face class time? We actually answer this particular question in a negative. We said, you know what, it's not to deliver new material. Students can access content on their own, and they're used to accessing content on their own. I'm used to accessing content when I'm on my own. If something in my house doesn't work, I jump onto YouTube and I try to find a video that shows me how to fix it. And inevitably, there is one out there. My son, he's 8. He does the same thing. He loves origami. So when he wants to learn how to make something new out of origami, off to YouTube he goes. And so we realized that low-level Bloom stuff, the information transfer, doesn't have to be done with me physically present in the room. I can use that time to really engage my students deeply, get them involved in inquiry, and get them into the higher level of Bloom's taxonomy, and get them working on projects, and get them working on creating things. So you're going to have to answer this question for yourself, and I can't give you the answer to that, but hopefully you realize that information transfer can be done in other ways, and you can get some time back in your class. So again, I mentioned this, that it's going to look different. If you're a 4th grade reading teacher, it's going to look different than a high school math class or a college history class or a middle school science class. It's going to look different. There will be some similarities, but it's going to look different. And we chronicle some of this in our writing. We're going to talk about it in the next webinar. But don't think that there's just a formulaic way to flip your class. This is a tool that you leverage when it's appropriate to help you reinvent your classroom space. So John, let's do our shameless self-promotion here real quick.
Well, yeah, flip classroom. See, our first book was Flip Your Classroom, so that's like iteration number 1. Our second book, Flipped Learning, right, is about taking it to the next level. So it's like Harry Potter 1 and 2. You got, it's got to read them in order. I don't know, whatever. But the idea is, I encourage you to pick up a couple of copies of these books. I mean, they're short. I mean, Aaron, they're 100 pages long. And so it leads us to so when we talk about flip class to flip learning, is we really think this is sort of the schematic that I think that helps you understand it. So that first year, Aaron and I flipped our class. We call it Flip Class 101. But then the next year, we moved to Flip Mastery. We moved to a competency-based, objective-based system where kids moved at a flexible pace. But then the interesting thing we found is that a number of teachers did not move from flipped class to flipped mastery, but they chose not to do mastery, but they did flipped with peer instruction, or flipped with project-based, or flipped with something called Genius Hour. We won't take time to go into these in detail. Or the really cool inquiry techniques called Explore, Flip, Apply, developed by our colleague Ramsey Musalam. And then a bunch of teachers have, I don't know a bunch, but quite a few teachers have moved to even gamifying their classrooms, particularly with mastery. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing teachers move beyond the flipped classroom to deeper forms, which we're going to call flipped learning. And that leads us to what, Aaron? A chat, right?
Yeah. So John, you were on Twitter one night on a Twitter chat of some sort, and you were talking about this thing that we mentioned earlier about relationships.
Yeah.
And how relationships are extremely important in education. And someone pushed back a little bit on that. And so tell us about this Twitter chat and how it kind of helped us frame our second book.
As in that we have a typo. Dr. Kwame Brown. I see a typo there.
Oh, whoops.
So here's the way the chat worked out. I was having this, I don't know, you could even call it an argument on Twitter. And I was saying relationships matter. And some people were saying, well, content matter. And then kind of out of the blue, not out of the blue, he was in the conversation, Dr. Kwame Brown said this. Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
He said, how about we acknowledge that education is the intersection between content, curiosity, and relationship? And this really has become the foundation in many ways of our second book. We really talked about, his quote really helped to actually frame this book. Because if you were to look at education today, I think sadly we've got content. And I think that's why I was sort of arguing with people. We've forgotten about relationship and curiosity. And but what we think is we need to take the intersection. So this is what Dr. Kwame Brown was saying, is we need all three in equal parts, okay? So if we think about this, let's talk about each separately. So Aaron, tell me more about content and how, what is content, and if it's overdone, what's it look like?
Yeah, so, I mean, content is important. We can't get away from content. I mean, 3x equals 6 has an answer, and students need to know how to figure that out. I want my own children to know how to read, but if all we do is content all the time, it's just kind of cold and rote, and we're kind of in the thick of that in our standards-based world that we live in. We've been so worried about state tests and standardized tests and all this stuff that a lot of teachers are afraid to kind of do anything other than content instruction because, frankly, some of our jobs are at stake if their students don't perform well on that. But there's so much more to education than just content. But we can't abandon content altogether, but we don't want to go overboard and talk only about content because then it's just kind of cold and rote. So this idea of curiosity is very, very important. Now, we want to be careful of not swinging too far into the curiosity side at the expense of relationships or at the expense of content, where if all our kids are doing is only pursuing what they're interested about, frankly, I have one of my own children, if she was allowed to do anything she wanted to, she would never learn how to read. She would make the world a very beautiful place, and I would be thankful for that, but she wouldn't learn how to read. She's kind of a reluctant reader. So, but curiosity, if we don't get students involved and get them inspired and wanting to learn more about what they want to learn, then they're going to get bored, they're going to get disinterested, and they're going to start to resent education. So if we go too far with curiosity, then things just kind of get mushy and we don't do a whole lot of learning. So the last part is relationship. Relationships are insanely important in education. We really, really value relationships. We don't want to just focus on relationships, or we'll just kind of sit around a campfire, hold hands, sing campfire songs, and we won't actually learn anything. But to be honest, if we're focused too much on the content side, if we're focused too much on the curiosity side, and we sacrifice the relational aspect, we kind of forget the fact that learning is really a human enterprise. It's a human-to-human enterprise. It's a community practice where it's not just about stuff. It's about people. It's not just about ideas that people want to pursue. It's about how those ideas impact people on a very local level and on a worldwide level. So we really want to foster healthy relationships between students and teachers, between students and students, and then help students understand how what they're learning applies to the larger context of where they live. So John, how did that take us then to this idea of deeper learning and further learning? So
as we framed the book around content, curiosity, and relationship, we realized that we sort of have two goals in many ways in education. We want to have our kids learn deeper, and we also want them to go further, all right? So learn deeper and go further. And so really, as we think about our three, content, curiosity, and relationships, particularly with content and curiosity, content is about taking learning deeper. And curiosity is taking learning further. And this is all in the context. And so maybe our graphic is wrong because relationship is the thing that kind of is enmeshed in all of it, I think. It's in the context of good connections with students. And maybe let's now go look at that chart we had a little bit ago, but let's add a couple of things. So remember that chart, flipped class 101, but flipped mastery is a way to go deeper. Flipped peer instruction is a way to go deeper, but project-based extends the learning to something else. So that's further, if you will. Don't you see? So it's about curiosity. You could also put curiosity, or you could put content on this. I mean, the deeper strategies tend to help you with, doing better on assessments. Maybe standards assess, the Common Core test, or the Virginia State of Standards test, or the Texas test, or if you're in another country, whatever the big state test. But we also don't want to just do that. we also want to go further and get them an opportunity to explore what they care about. And so the book, the second book, is really geared around this deeper, further thing. So remember, the first book is Flipped Class 101, and the second book is about flipped learning, and we've couched this second book in terms of going deeper and further in the context of content, curiosity, and relationship. Now, one of the questions we keep hearing about from you guys is, does this work? I think I've answered this several times in the chat, but we have a website. Our nonprofit is collecting research and has research on the efficacy of flipped learning. And so I encourage you to go there, read it. We've got, we just published, I would say maybe June, another literature review of all the literature that's being done on this, and you can read it, and you can basically say that it's working, but we need more research. So if you are a researcher out there, I saw some of you were at teachers' colleges and were teaching professors of education. We need more action research, and so I want to call people to do action research on the flipped classroom. A lot of it's being done as we speak. I bet, I don't know how many you get, Aaron, but I bet I get an email once a week from somebody doing action research wanting me to get some input. And so there's going to be a lot of this. There's also been an interesting thing from a critic's perspective. So who's like saying, I wouldn't like the flipped classroom? A lot of people said, well, we love the idea, we don't like the idea of flipped classroom because it's going to make teachers less valuable. And I think it actually makes us more valuable. It moves us away from being content disseminators to now we are, facilitators of learning. But if you want to read our real thoughts on this, we've written a blog, and so we've shortened the URL down there. I encourage you to go to that link, and maybe we could type it into the chat or something.
I'm on it.
And just let you go read that post of Aaron's and my thoughts about how teachers actually matter more in a flipped classroom. Because I'm going to say something somewhat controversial, but please hear it right, okay? If you can be replaced by a YouTube video, then you should be. Now, hear what I'm saying. I'm not saying teachers should be replaced. I'm actually saying that the value a teacher adds is not just content dissemination, because the reality is everything that you teach, particularly I would say at a K-12 level, let's say, not always at the college level, is on YouTube. It's already there. So what do we have to offer? We have a lot to offer. We need to help kids process and think deeper, and it has to happen in relationships because, we're working with kids, and some kids are broken. Let's also admit that. There's broken kids. I just was listening to a radio show today about broken kids. It just moved me. A lot of kids are broken, and they need to learn in the context of somebody, an adult who cares. And who's that going to be? Oftentimes it's going to be you, the teacher. So that so shall happen. So there's a couple other issues that people also bring up as parents and students. So Aaron, why don't you talk about parents?
All right. So parents, inevitably you're going to encounter some parents who say, you know what, this is different than the way I learn. Now, you're probably already encountering that if you live in a Common Core state. They're saying this is different than a way I learned how to do math, or this is different than I did whatever. So these are realities of education. So the communication with parents is of utmost importance. You must communicate clearly how you are delivering content. You're not replacing yourself. You're not moving to an online class. You are using technological tools to help get the class time back so you can better meet the individual learning needs of those parents' children, and invite them into your classroom if they're curious. Open up your door and let them show them that you're spending time answering questions one-on-one, helping students with individual needs, that this is not a replacement for the teacher. This is bringing greater value to the classroom space. So communicate with them, communicate with them, communicate with them. That letter home at the beginning of the year, maybe you could flip your back to school night or your open house night where you can send out a video to the parents, a 5-minute video explaining who you are and how class works, and then when they show up, they can just ask questions instead of you trying to repeat yourself 5 or 6 times in 5 or 6 minutes on how your class typically operates. So that's something to consider. The other thing is students. Now, students they learn from video often. YouTube is out there. Video is ubiquitous. It's just a natural way for people to just kind of grab information. But you have to remember that teaching your students to view instructional content takes some time, and you have to make sure that they realize that viewing instructional material is different than viewing something for entertainment purposes. It's kind of the difference between reading a novel and reading a nonfiction book. You interact with them differently. So you're going to have to train your students to view content. Maybe teach them, hey, use the pause button. Put on some headphones that helps you focus. Teach them how to take notes. Give them some frameworks to take notes. Like John and I created some follow-along notes where students would kind of fill in the blanks if they wanted them. Not every student chose to do those, but it was a valuable resource for our students. So there's going to be a training process. You might want to take the first week or two of school to train your students how to operate in a flipped learning environment. So they're not just going to jump right in. It's going to take some time and a process to teach them your expectations of the classroom. All right, John.
So here's my challenge to you guys. My challenge to you here in the audience is to do it, to jump out of the pot, so to speak, and into the other, be the one who's going to be different. I think you can. Now, one thing you got to realize is, Aaron and I jumped all in. We flipped every lesson for both our chemistry and our AP chemistry course. We have not lectured in front of a group of kids since 2007. Okay. But you don't have to go all in. You know what? You could flip a lesson. So school starts, or maybe it started for you, or on the East Coast, it's about starting on Tuesday, wherever you're at. Could you flip a couple of lessons? Between now and say, September 15th, could you flip 2 lessons? That whole time thing, you could do 2. I encourage you to test the waters a little bit. I'd also encourage you to learn more. I mean, you talked to Aaron earlier about the training. You've got to learn more. Or go to these websites. These are the 3 websites. Flippedclass.com, of course, is where you can connect with Aaron and I. FlippedLearning.org is our nonprofit organization. That's where there's research. There's a conference that happens over there in the United States. By the way, at flippedclass.com, if you're interested in more, and if you are in Texas or somewhere near Texas, we are doing a regional conference in Texas January 9th and 10th. The first day, you get to visit flipped classes in and around the Dallas area. It's in Dallas. And then in the evening, there'll be content, and then on all-day Saturday, there's going to be workshops. So if you're in Texas at all, if you're out of the country, like in, say, the Middle East, I don't know if we've got an international audience, but we're doing FlipCon Dubai in January as well. And so a lot of these events are popping up around the world that we're hosting and running. So and then at flippedclassroom.org, like Aaron said, 21,000. That's right, 21,000 teachers from all over the world talking about the flipped classroom. There's a group for you. There's a group for science teachers, math teachers, college professors, elementary teachers. There's even like anatomy and physiology groups. In fact, you can make your own group. So I encourage you to go there. You got to join. It's free. My wife approves you, actually. She does that because some people would be not people, and they'd like spam us with like enhancement drugs, if you know what I'm talking about. So we don't want you to be getting that, so we have a physical person look at that. So anyway, I encourage you to visit those sites and get help. So we have some time for some questions. I think we've been answering quite a few of them. But,
yeah, John, real quick, someone's asking about the source of that Common Core chart. That's called the Depth of Knowledge chart.
Yeah, I typed it in there. Dr.
Oh,
Webb.
you did.
Dr.
You got
Webb.
that one. Okay, good.
W-E-B-B is how it's spelled. But yeah, maybe somebody didn't see me respond to it. Yeah, Dr. Webb, W-E-B-B, from the University of Wisconsin, Madison.
All right. So yeah, I'm looking for some more questions here. John, did you see any come up that might be of interest to the broader audience in our time that we have remaining here?
A science teacher, I was wondering how effective a pre-lab would be. Flipped.
Oh. Yeah, that's a great idea. So I've talked to quite a few science teachers who have done exactly that. They do the pre-lab instruction, kind of the how to get the equipment set up and things like that as an instructional video. Some teachers who've moved to kind of an asynchronous classroom where students are moving through material at their own pace, they've even taken that, that video and then they've created a QR code that they just tape on the wall above the lab station. Students zap it with their phone or their iPad or whatever device they have, and it takes them to the video that teaches them how to set that up. So yeah, that's a great use of instructional time. Good. What else here? Music teachers. Yeah, I've talked to music teachers who have flipped their music theory. A lot of kids have, maybe taken piano lessons from a very young age, and students come in very wide ranges of their understanding of music theory. So she's created kind of an asynchronous environment where students, she does a pretest and then creates individualized modules for students to work through based on video art that she's archived and made those available to
And I'm at flippedclassroom.org, and there is a whole topics on music. So someone asked, is it our website? There's 6 pages where the word music is used. I'm not sure if there's actually a group, but there's kind of an arts group. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff about music on there. So I'd encourage you to just go there and do some searching.
Yep. John, did you respond to the one about the Monday Flip class Twitter chat?
I have not. No. What was the question?
They just want to know what the hashtag is. If you could type that into the chat, that would be great. Yeah, drama classrooms and video conferencing. You know, interesting, video conferencing. Let me talk a little bit about that. I did some work with a regional instructional unit in the state of Nebraska, kind of very rural community, farm communities. A lot of the schools are very spread out. And something that instructional unit has done is they've invested in some teleconferencing systems so that they can have, you know, one teacher who might be the only qualified, let's say, advanced placement chemistry teacher in 8 different schools. And you might have 1 or 2 kids in each of those schools who might want to take AP Chemistry. So what they do is they have the one teacher teach AP Chemistry remotely to these 8 different schools, to these 8 to 16 students. And some of those teachers, they came to my workshop that I did and they said, oh, Aaron, this is going to help us so much because we spend all of our time on the video conference time teaching them the new material, and the kids are kind of left to their own devices to figure it out on their own, to work through the practice problems and do all the other stuff. So what they're going to do now is they're going to start delivering the video instruction to the students before they have the video conferencing time, and then use the video conference time to answer questions and to discuss how they're working through the material and any questions they have as well.
Now,
so, yeah,
one thing I can add, Aaron, to all this is, in terms of a lot of you asking, how do I flip English, how do I flip math, how do I flip Montessori, da-da-da-da-da-da. I would encourage you to come to the next webinar next week, because that's really the topic of the next webinar. We're going to talk about each subject one at a time, talk through, here's what a math class looks like, here was a science class. In fact, can we say this, Aaron? But we're writing 5 more books, Aaron, right? We've just signed a contract to write 5 more books, and what are the topics?
Flipping a math class, flipping a science class, flipping an English class, and so on.
Yeah, so we're so science, math, elementary, English, and social studies. So those books hopefully will be coming out relatively soon, and will be very specific. I know that doesn't address music. Sorry, music teachers.
Hey, John, here's a question. Here's an interesting question, and I think we have a good answer for this. It says, I'm currently using Camtasia to create my videos. Is there an advantage to Adobe Presenter over Camtasia? So the interesting thing about this is the tools. What tools do we recommend, and what tools do we use? To be honest, our recommendation is to pick one that you like, that accomplishes what you need it to accomplish, and to use it well. There's no possible way you could ever learn all the tools, and every tool always has something that works better in it than something else, and there's always another tool that has a feature that you always wish your tool had. There's never going to be a perfect tool out there. So as soon as you can just kind of accept that fact, the easier it will be to find a tool that you like and to really get good at that one particular content creation tool, and to just maximize it, use it to the best of your abilities and to the extent of its resources. So the best tool out there is the one that you are actually going to use.
Yeah, so to answer your question there, Nissim, is that I would say it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, So I'd have to have a conversation with you about, I know the features of both, but it depends. One has quizzing features. They both have quizzing features. One is, I don't know, there's so many, it's like a comparison. This is one of our tasks, actually. We want to put it at flipclass.com. We're going to try and create kind of like here's the tools, and this is what you like, and here's the features, and then you can pick the one that you like that makes the most sense for you. If you have a PC, some don't work on a PC and they only work on a Mac, some work on an iPad, Android, so there's device questions, but then also what do you want to accomplish and what's your learning curve? I mean, there's a number of variables, and this is this tool that we want to put on flipclass.com in the near future. So hopefully that will be something we're going to get done, soon.
John, we got a question here from Jonathan. It says, do you begin class by checking students' understanding of the video? How do we check that they actually view the content, and I think even better, whether they really interacted with the content, and how do we check that, and how do we start class off?
Multiple answers to that question. Number one, we just checked their notes, and then we had them ask interesting questions. This is before our kids all had access to the internet. They never did, by the way, our kids. Or some teachers will have a Google form or some kind of not just Google, but some kind of an online little quiz, so that when the kids walk in, you know how they did on the quiz. So you already know who watched the video and how well they got it, right? So you'll understand that. So there's many, many ways to sort of check for understanding. Some people give just a physical paper quiz, like a bell starter quiz at the beginning of class. I mean, that's another method. There are myriads of ways. In fact, it's one of the most talked about topics, by the way, at flipclassroom.org, is how do you sort of check up on them? I mean, there's sort of two parts. Are you checking up on them sort of the big brother model, or are you really just trying to check for understanding, or some combination of the two? And that's one of the biggest topics there. And I've just mentioned, I don't know, 3 or 4 options that I've seen, but there are hundreds probably. And so what's going to be the best system that you're comfortable with, that works with your kids, your age group of kid? I mean, there's a lot of variables there, but it's important. I mean, the key is actually to make your videos interactive, and that the interactivity, I think, you need to be able to see how they're interacting, you the teacher, so that you can critique when they're, sort of missing the boat, I guess.
Yep. Well, John, most of the rest of the questions are very procedural, and so they have to do with the video archive. They have to do of this session. They have to do with handouts. So I think at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I think it would be good to hand this back over to our hosts at ASCD if you have anything to wrap up. Otherwise, I think we'll just sign off. So ASCD friends.
Yes, thank you, Aaron. Couple of quick things to wrap up the webinar here. John Bergmann and Aaron Sams ASCD book, Flip Your Classroom, Reach Every Student in Every Class Every Day, is available at the ASCD store. Visit shop.ascd.org and search for the title of the to purchase.